Geopolitics and Empire is joined by Claudio Grass, who's a former airline executive, Swiss Peace Corps officer, and an investment manager specialized in precious metals. I've been following his work for, I don't know how many years now. It's great work. Welcome to Geopolitics and Empire, Claudio.
Hey, thank you very much, Jorge. Always a pleasure. I mean, first time, first talk. I think I have 11 years of history, something, I started, I think, writing 10, 11 years ago.
Yeah. I was just saying, I don't know what took me so long to get you on. I've been reading your stuff for like probably 5+ years, but in any case, I mean, there's so much going on in the world, Claudio. But I tend to start first with the global megatrend that's affecting us all, right? The Great Reset. You were involved with the Planet Lockdown documentary films, and it's this drive by an international elite to install a planetary dictatorship. They use whatever they can cook up to scare us into this new neo-feudalism, right? Terrorism, the weather, fake health scares, and so forth. And in fact, this week they're meeting at Davos, right? And so not too far from where you're at. So what's sort of your assessment for this push for world government? Nothing which is new, but it seems to be reaching an apex point, or climax. So your take on the past couple of years, the planet lockdown, and this push. Who are these elites, and how you view their agenda, and how far they are along?
Yeah. I mean, we can see a push towards centralization for quite some time. I mean, many years. Global problems need global solutions. Therefore, you need a global government. That's already in the pipeline, for decades. And I think, because we are witnessing the end of socialism. I mean, this system has nothing to do with capitalism or free markets, So it's really the end of socialism. It's the end of, money it's never the scarcity of money, especially not in the credit-based system. It's always about the scarcity of goods and services. And I think, we have printed so much money. I mean, it's unprecedented in history. Everything comes to an end. And I think even, the elites and the central bankers, and all the institutional idiots, they basically understand that, that this system is going bust, that we are at the end of a long-term cycle, different cycles, at the end of different cycles, let's call it that way. And so you need to distract the people. So come up with this fake pandemic, it's like a biblical script. The disease, then artificial war, then we have artificial famines, and now the biblical flood. I always say the biblical flood most likely will be the flood, with refugees coming into the Western world. So to me, I think, it's really, the elites they understand it's over. They have a certain agenda. They believe they can somehow steer the ships into one direction, make sure that they still believe the nanny state will take care of them. Come up, with this modern monetary theory, give them a universal basic income, transfer them into metaverse, have their fake reality in their digital world, sitting at home eating bugs. It's so absurd, the whole stuff. So I think, it's Corona really, when it started in March, I basically said, this is the official invitation to leave the system because they will lock us out anyway. Back then, people were saying, hey, Claudio, this is extreme. Forget about it. It's really, and now, we are 3 years in this 2 weeks flatten the curve bullshit. And we're still there. And, now we have this artificial war, of course, in Ukraine, which is basically the old agenda of Halford Mackinder, said Brzezinski, how to Europe and Asia should not become a seamless market because, the market goes from Lisbon to Vladivostok. And of course, all the natural goods in the ground, Russia and the industrial powerhouse of Germany cannot come together. I think that was also one of the main causes for the First World War, to avoid that. And now we're back, look at the guys, the politicians are all 78, 80 years old. So most of them are senile. And so they're, old guys are pushing the old ideas. That's where we are. And unfortunately, is that, the majority of the people seem to become domesticated humans. Give me food and shelter. I don't want to think myself, because if I would start to think myself, what's really going on, use my own mind, independent of another person's guidance, I mean, most likely they would be shocked, this kind of cognitive dissonance. But I mean, as Ayn Rand always said, we can try to ignore reality, but one day reality is not going to ignore what's really going on. And so I think it's coming. I mean, the trend is clear. I think it's really, we're going into in a much more decentralized future midterm. I think, I don't see it centralized. I hope we're going to end up, with hundreds of thousands or thousands of Switzerlands, or state of Switzerland, even better. Keep it as decentralized as possible. And I think that's maybe what, at least the productive people who believe in themselves and understand that they are an enlightened individual, that they are, part of this Western culture, free speech, private property needs to be respected. We always have a choice. And to me, freedom means we have a choice to decide between what's right and what's wrong, and not what's legal or illegal. And so I think, those values have been forgotten. They are now heavily under pressure. It's basically a cultural war. It's a war against Western civilization. And hopefully, more and more people are going to wake up in the future once they realize that it's not the 5-star restaurant any longer, but it might be, box at the McDonald's, and that the job is also gone, and that the future is not that bright, and that all these promises by government basically are empty bags.
I'm going all the way up. I'm going all the way up. I'm letting go in my heart of everything that holds me down. Look up to the sky and I got this relief inside. Then there's no need to hide. I'm going all the way up. I'm going all the way up. I'm letting go in my heart of everything that holds me down.
If you do find yourself stuck in a smart city, the Nomos app will help you survive COVID-19 84 and the Great Reset. Nomos is a time bank that can be used by communities anywhere in the world. You just need to talk people into using it. I've spoken to the developer who is passionate about creating solutions for surviving and thriving in the apocalypse. Nomos is available in English and Spanish, so hurry and visit nomos.net before they roll out the cashless society and put you in the algorithm ghetto.
I hope we move in that direction as you described, and there's so many things you just mentioned there, but maybe to stick on the geopolitical, you mentioned the artificial war, the multipolar. You've written about the East versus West. Your thoughts on, for example, Putin and Russia and Xi Jinping and China, because on one hand, as you described, there is that, Halford Mackinder, world island heartland real aspect where there's a real geopolitical conflagration. But on the other hand, we see the East also, like in Russia and China. And I was living in Kazakhstan from 2017 until the pandemic, and they installed the QR codes and biosecurity measures in every country. And so I'm trying to figure out, how is it sometimes it looks like it's East versus West, and then other times it looks like East and West versus their own populations. But nevertheless, you do see that part of the world coming together, BRICS plus, Saudi Arabia, and trying to develop common currencies and integrating, right? Iran and Syria and Venezuela and China and all these countries. How do you sort of view this shift as well? That includes de-dollarization. And so your further thoughts on East and West.
Yeah, I mean, at the end of the day, it's all based on the Hegelian dialectic, problem, reaction, solution. So you always need to, divide and conquer, fear and control, shock and awe. That's basically, what the elites are using to steer the people into a certain direction. So, when I think about, let's say, Mao, for example, Mao was a Yale man. He was back in 1973, front page Yale University, the magazine. And so basically Mao has been built up by the Western world. That's how he became chairman and started the Cultural Revolution. So I tend to believe that everything is a Muppet show and that there is nothing happening by coincidence in politics. But of course, you always have to divide the people, because the feeling that I have is really that they're looking for a French Revolution 2.0. The king is dead. Long live the king. So, just try to exchange the heads, but then we are stuck, of course, or stuck in the same system again. But it's not going to solve any issues. I think that's why you need this East and West. War is the health of the state. Whenever you have problems internally, if you have some foreign aggression or, you can basically accelerate fear and accelerate these national feelings. It might have an impact that it can prolong a certain politic. But I think, I tend to believe it's a Muppet show. I don't see any good politicians, basically, who are in power, or that politics is the competition of crooks. And that's it. And I don't understand people even after 3 years, we don't need rulers. I'm a grown up, I'm mature, I'm self-sustainable. So I don't need anyone telling me what to think, what to eat, what to drink. I think the whole idea that we need rulers, that only a slave needs slave masters. But I think, in the Western world, especially, we really should forget about, this two-class society system made up of people who live off tax money and others who have to pay taxes. I think that's really the end. It doesn't make sense. And look at you always have to destroy an old system to create a new one. So even when you look at Hollywood and the movies, so even they try to destroy the faith into the institutions, into the nation state as well. So I think there is they are playing a game, these elites, just keep the people moving. And, but they also have no clue what's coming out of it at the end of the day. They try to promote a certain agenda. I think we can imagine that agenda or grasp it because we have been brainwashed for the last 30, 40 years through Hollywood. The world in 2025, pandemia, everything is robot, artificial intelligence. I think it's all bullshit. It's all bullshit. The car in my, the voice record or the voice system in my car still doesn't get when I ask, for a certain song. Of course, can be my Swiss accent. But so amazing. Yeah. Because you often see people who truly believe that this is the only way forward. That the future is made, that we don't have a choice. So I think, people really, and that's sad, people really, nothing is decided yet. But of course, you have to think, you have to take initiatives, you have to network and leave the system, and prepare, for the breakdown of the current system. Might take a year, 2, 3. In the meanwhile, the longer it takes, the more war we're going to see. Civil riots or international wars, this East-West bullshit. I really don't know yet, but I think if people prepare themselves, then even, during the First and the Second World War, the ones who understood what's going on, that did not become, a part of the Muppet show, I think they also survived in the best possible way.
Yeah, I tend to agree with you. I'm still on the fence on some issues, but more and more, I've read, you mentioned Mao and Yale, a couple months back, I came across that material. And so, yeah, it very much does seem to be a show at the global level, but still, as you said, I think there's a element of black swan, maybe elites, they're infighting between elites and someone launches nukes somewhere, whether in Washington or Moscow, which I think would still help them with their agenda. As you said, war, they can build back better after destroying the old systems. But you mentioned also the technocratic aspect, and I would also agree that they tend to hype a lot of stuff. I don't think AI will become sentient. I think it's more like It's they program the AI to control us, and so they're hyping a lot of stuff. But one of my concerns has been this cashless system. You've been writing about the digital currencies and CBDCs, and it's basically the social credit system. I like to call it the algorithm ghetto, or rule algocracy, ruled by algorithm. And in their own writings, like Nick Bostrom and others have talked about creating an algocracy, a global government run by AI software, a global surveillance state for our own good, right? Because the system knows better. And we saw with the COVID digital passports, even here in Mexico, in some places, in other parts of the world, you could not go buy. It's like the Book of Revelation. You couldn't buy or sell literally in food or in supermarkets without having your digital passport that gave you a green light that you were vaxxed or whatever. People were fired from work, so you couldn't work, you couldn't buy food, you couldn't travel. In some cases, you couldn't leave your home. I read about, like in the Philippines, if you were caught unvaccinated on the street, they would fine you or jail you and whatnot. And so, your further thought, and you've been talking about how you were censored and deplatformed on many platforms. So your further thoughts on this technocracy and this trend that we're going in this direction, and how much success they might have, or do you think at some point it's going to fall apart?
Okay, I mean, I think the most important aspect when it comes to the internet is that the internet came into existence without being planned. So it's basically quite anarchistic, grown. I think, and the basis for the internet is complete decentralization. Of course, we agreed to use certain protocols, standards, to communicate. We use centralized Microsoft tools, stuff like this. So I think because the internet is completely decentralized, I believe it's not steerable, it's not controllable. Decentralized structures are by nature always more superior than centralized structures. So, when we had this breakdown of WhatsApp and Facebook, let's say 6, 7, 8 months ago, I mean, I was told that it was really an attack and they really had to pull the plug. They could not stop it, the attack somehow. So that just shows, of course, we will have, even today, we can decide to use, decentralized peer-to-peer software to communicate freely and so on. And of course, the internet connectivity needs to be assured in the future by, this Internet of Things is not always that negative, because we have to establish new networks with Bluetooth, with all different kind mesh networks, and then keep it extremely decentralized, and then from there basically start it up. So I think whatever is coming, whatever is happening, the internet will be part of the future. It will also be accessible for the freedom-loving individuals, that we can still communicate and trade with each other, even when when there might be a totalitarian structure. I mean, there is nothing, as I said, nothing is decided. I mean, maybe we have to leave the cities, maybe we have to relocate. I think I don't want to be in New York anyway, when the grocery stores are empty. They are 9 days between chaos and complete breakdown of society. And I think, these are, so that's all coming, and all the technocratic stuff. I think even there we have a choice, but we have to use our mind and choose carefully, and we have to also decide in which direction we want to go in general. Do we want to follow the centralized way, which might be now the easier for the short term? Or are we willing to really, say, no, this is not my Muppet Show any longer. I have to go the opposite. I want to build up a network with like-minded individuals, go a bit off-grid, looking into certain areas where you have a good culture, a culture of trust still, where people don't shoot each other as soon as there is no police in the streets. I mean, I think there are certain cultural regions are left. Of course, in Europe, I mean, Germany, France, that's a big UK. It's a huge problem. Even this cultural Marxism or this neo-Marxism. I mean, the Marxists were always saying, when they realized in the First World War that the proletarians are not going for the revolution, they basically had to switch, and they were saying the intellectuals and the guys in culture are going to lead the revolution, and that's where we are now. And I think it's pretty obvious. It's this Muppet Show. So to me, it's just a big surprise that people are not willing to look at it a bit more closer and to I mean, this political correctness, of course, is terrible. People that this censorship when it comes to political correctness. But I think, we are all reasonable human beings. Man is that what distinguishes us from animals, that we can use reason. And at the same time, I believe in a creator. I believe in God or the universe, but something, a spirit. It's not just matter, like the materialists are telling us, the Marxists, that the man is a piece of meat, and so you can basically breed him like an animal. I think all the people on our side, they understand that there is a God, that there is a creator, that this is not just the Big Bang. Give me the first seconds, and then I explain you how this world came into existence. All these anointed intellectual idiots, terrible. I mean, really, it's absurd. It's so absurd. But hopefully I was able to answer that question.
Yeah, I totally agree with you. And that Stockholm syndrome among the populace. I mean, this morning I read some 30-year-old American Idol TV star dropping dead. We see there's just so many people dropping dead daily, and the level of, as you said, this is Stockholm syndrome. Like, what's it going to take? On one hand, what's it going to take for people to wake up? On the other hand, I think you're alluding to it. We can't wait for these people. We have to move on and start making, preparations to survive and thrive. And to get back to the economic situation, I've been following the Austrian school for a long time. This crack up boom that seems to be coming. I thought it'd come much earlier. They seem to just keep being able to extend it into infinity. You had the global financial crisis 2008, and then of course a lot of people talk about how during 2020 there was going to be this economic crisis, but they used the pandemic to sort of keep moving, kick the can down the road. But I'm starting to see signs again of the crack up boom approaching. We see all over the planet supply chains breaking down, shops that are empty. You see some people help wanted signs all over the place. Inflation is just raging insanely in many countries, and it's not going away. People talk about hyperinflation. So your sort of thoughts on this economic crisis or crash that's going to come at some point? How bad is it going to be? Just sort of your feeling on what's ahead on the economic front.
Yeah, I think I wouldn't be surprised if people would lose 30% of their living standards this year. I mean, inflation is there. We have this. We started an avalanche of 3 years ago. Everything takes time. But we have riots in 90 countries. We have food shortages. We have all these zombie companies in the economy in the US, also in Europe, and now even Germany is being deindustrialized. So all the politics by the Western world in general, it's going against the interests of their own people. So it's really, now with the energy, they also control that narrative. They will decide also in the future, you get the energy and you will not get the energy. And they might also steer, this a lot of new debt into a new bubble, this Build Back Better bullshit bubble, which is not, so it might prolong a bit in combination with MMT and UBI, so you keep the slaves a bit more focused or calm. But at the end of the day, it's not going to work. It never worked, and it will also not work this time. But it might prolong the whole system a bit longer. But on the other side, I think inflation. It can. These black swans can happen at any time. And now, interestingly, I think because when it comes to gold, for example, or precious metals, you have those. We just have seen the signals. So, for example, gold was breaking up. Or breaking out against, government bonds, the S&P 500, the tech sector, in all different currencies. So that we have seen those signals back in 1999, 2000. And that's when we started this 11-year bull market for gold, when we went from 180 to 1900 at the end of the day. And I think, so that's one of the signals which we have been waiting for a long time. And so I think, it just shows, paper currency, gold is not losing, just paper currency going up and down versus gold. And with inflation, it just shows. I mean, also when you look at gold in Hungarian forint, I think it's up, 45%, Turkish lira, 70%, euro, I don't know where we are now, 10%. But I mean, it just shows, so the trust, whenever people have trust in the institutions, then also the currency is getting stronger of that institution. And I think now we can see that it's diminishing. And that I wouldn't be surprised, to see a euro crisis this year. And when it comes to, when we look at the total financial universe, I think 52% is still, the United States. Europe is 9.8%, and then we still have the world currency reserve, US dollar, with 58-60% still of all the reserves on US dollar. So to me, I still have the feeling, that the dollar or gold at the end of the day. And in the meanwhile, I believe euros might go, or other currencies, and when people when they become nervous, that they basically flee into the safe haven, which still is considered the US dollar. And that would then also lead to that crack up boom, which you mentioned at the beginning. But I mean, we might be wrong, and, the dollar might go before. At the end of the day, nobody knows the future. But at the end of the day, we should come up or think about stuff and come up with decisions where these details will not make a difference when it comes to the preservation of our wealth. So you have possibilities.
You mentioned Europe, and since you're there, get your further thought on that. I'm a proud Croatian and Croatian citizen, but I'm ashamed to be an EU citizen. I've never been a fan of the European Union. I view it as the blueprint for world government, technocracy. It's anti-democratic. If I recall, some of the founders, like Jean Monnet, even in their own writings, were saying that. Some say the EU has Nazi roots. Soviet dissidents like Vladimir Bukovsky have described the EU. Even Mikhail Gorbachev, who I met a couple years ago and shook hands with, the late Gorbachev, they were talking about the EU as the new European Soviet. And so people are talking about the disintegration of the EU. And you were talking about Germany. I mean, I was in the US recently. I met a German Croat, and he was saying, like, yeah, it's bad. It's being deindustrialized, inflation. It's just crazy. And so, your further thoughts on the European Union as well as Europe, as a whole.
Yeah, I'm very bearish when it comes to Europe. I mean, at the end of the day, we are in between, the US and the East at the end of the day. And when we look at what's going on with Germany, we are really back to the Morgenthau plan after the Second World War, when the goal was, okay, we have to destroy Germany. It should become an agrarian country so that it will be no future threat or whatever. And then, of course, they came with the Marshall Plan, and the Marshall Plan, it was clear that if they really want to spread, all these US dollars and to become another push for this world currency, and then they also knew that Germany needs to be prosperous as well, otherwise it's not going to work. And so now we had that for a cycle, for these 50 years or something. And now it's over again, and we are going back. I mean, we are, or let's say 100 years. I mean, we are really, there are so many similarities and patterns of the past that we are seeing these days, which we are going back in time. We're going back to barbarism, as long as, and that's, Europe, the migration crisis. It's different cultures. I'm always saying, I laugh. I was living 2 years in the Middle East. I have friends from the Arab world, Egypt, from Syria, from, Lebanon, everywhere. And I love the culture. I felt extremely comfortable down there. But of course, when I was talking to my Syrian friends, for example, they were always telling me, hey, they have seen this Hollywood movie, Muppet Show, so saying, hey, if we can make it to Germany, then, or to Europe, then there is where milk and fruits and everything. And I get a house, I get the car. So they had all these naive ideas, because they have never been allowed to travel, or then were locked up also under their government and so on. But this is it's really just to destroy the cultures and to create those political identity groups, and to create tension among the people living in a certain country. Because if you push it politically, but the people have to pay for it, and are not being asked if they agree with it, and it's a clear political agenda to really, and you cannot, I mean, if you buy Calcutta, you become Calcutta. I mean, that's what, and I think it's really just to weaken the whole structure. And when we look at woke, the woke culture, I mean, at the end of the day, it's like in the Catholic Church, the original sin. So woke is basically if you are born white and male and heterosexual and maybe even Christian, I mean, then you are, that's the origin sin. You cannot escape from it. So it's the new religion, and so it goes also against maybe the people in the Western world in general.
Yeah, I mean, again, they talk about this in their own words. I recall a BBC interview with Peter Sutherland, big high-level diplomat, politician who's been attended Bilderberg and UN, and what you just said, he said himself that was their goal, to mix the cultures and that sort of thing. My trick, as you mentioned, white, male, Christian. I just became a Mexican 5 years ago. Became a Mexican citizen, so I'm a minority now. They can't say anything about me. I've got my get out of jail free card. You can't call me white, whatever. I'm Mexican. So, anyways, that's just a loophole, gaming the system. But talking about everything we've talked about, I asked my guests from all walks of life, how do we, the individual and the people surrounding that we network with, how do we best prepare to weather the storm ahead? There's gold, of course, buying physical assets, gold, silver, property, farmland. There's a lot of people that I've been talking to fleeing here to Mexico, where I am, or Latin America, Uruguay. I've had Doug Casey on the program, Matt Smith, who are down in Uruguay, others going to Paraguay, others going to different parts of other parts of the world. But key themes like buying physical assets as much as you can, forming a like-minded group, network or community, parallel society, parallel structures, parallel economy. And as you said, a lot of people leaving urban areas and going to rural areas. And so your sort of further thoughts on preparing for these hard times ahead.
I mean, that's also exactly what we are also doing over here over the last 3 years. I started 3 years Plan B. It's basically a small municipality in the southern part of Switzerland. So it's off-grid. It's a small narrow road that goes up there. Not too many people living there. So I brought in, I think, 250 people over the last 3 years from abroad looking at it. And in the meantime, now we have, I think, 90 or 100 different projects over here in Switzerland. But of course, it needs time. But I mean, everyone has his own rhythm. And still, when it comes to Europe, of course, if I would be in Germany or somewhere in France, or in Italy, I mean, maybe I would be a bit more. I mean, even also when you have seen, how the government treated the people. I mean, Switzerland was a completely different story than the rest of the world. No police going after us, and these lockdowns have been different. I never wear the muzzle. For example, I was even flying without wearing a muzzle. I mean, you can always hack the system. I never had troubles. Nobody was hostile against me. For example, in Switzerland, not wearing a muzzle and so on. I was also traveling all over Europe for this movie, and basically it was the same. You could always. I mean, I had a medical certificate, of course, because I cannot wear a muzzle. It's not good for my health. So I didn't want to have disputes with the police. I'm not a troublemaker. But of course, I'm a free man, and I can always find a way out, how to deal with it. But I think, we cannot do much more. I mean, even now, planning is really hard because we don't know how it will develop in the future. So I think property. I mean, when I talk to people over here in Switzerland, for example, I mean, it's too early to buy property. That's why also a lot of people are buying gold. Because real estate is coming down anyway. I mean, the great reset. You own nothing and you will be happy. I mean, it starts with denying, the right of an individual to command himself. And so that's the logic outcome. So, but I mean, so real estate crisis is coming. These prices are going to drop. Maybe we're going to lose 90% in real estate, like we have seen 100 years ago. And and you don't know, if there is a war. I mean, it's really dangerous that, I mean, all these weapons going into Ukraine, and Ukraine is a shithole, to be frank, because it has been so corrupted for decades, centuries. And now we basically send, weapons over there. So I have the feeling, in the future, these weapons, you can even buy Stinger on the darknet. So, I mean, and Ukraine is so corrupted, they're going to sell their weapons to everywhere. I don't know where they're going to pop up, most likely, in Europe, or it will be used against Europe. Everything is possible. But I mean, the whole show, it's, it just doesn't make sense.
So are you speaking from experience? I guess you guys got a Stinger you bought for your little community out there in Switzerland. No, I'm just kidding. Are you going to Davos this week or no? To the World Economic Forum?
I go in that direction, of course, but I'm not gonna go to Davos. No, I think even the World Economic Forum. I mean, these are just the anointed idiots who truly believe that they are so wise and so intelligent and so powerful that they can change the world, that they can stand there and say, okay, we're going to limit, global heating, by 1.5 degrees Celsius. I mean, which is absolutely nonsense. What these freaks do they believe? Who they are. I mean, I have a friend of mine. I know a few politicians which I really adore, like Ron Paul, for example, or Gottfried Bloom from the UK, or even also Václav Klaus, former president of the Czech. And so he was always invited in Davos at the beginning. And then I think already 10 years ago, he wrote an essay about Homo Davosicus, basically describing, that these guys are coming together and they come together. They believe we can save the planet, we can save the world. They are so brainwashed and so far away from, So of course, when he wrote that essay, he was basically then also not invited any longer. And but I mean, the WEF, gangsters.
I am
there, front organization. I mean, there are some other people most likely in the background. I mean, it's just part of the narrative. And of course, they have people in government. I mean, so you have an agenda and those anointed idiots.
Yeah, I'd agree with you. I reference them because they are what we see, but there's much more behind. And I'm a huge fan of Václav Klaus, and Gottfried Bloom's been a guest of mine on the podcast here.
Cool.
He's fantastic. And I've had Daniel McAdams of the Ron Paul Institute as well.
Oh, nice.
As a guest. And we've covered a lot. My sort of takeaway from you is, again, being optimistic and having grit and just moving forward with our own personal visions to protect ourselves and to thrive as much as we can. And I would agree with you. I think a lot of these plans or projects by the elites won't go exactly the way that they want, but nevertheless, there's going to be a lot of pain and fallout. And as you said, we don't exactly know where things are going to go. Is there any other issue that we haven't touched on that you think a lot about, or that's pressing, or anything else you want to get across?
I mean, maybe the when we look at Switzerland, for example. Because today, I mean, you have the impact. You can have, let's say, a lot of people believe that Switzerland is the belly of the beast. Because you have all these international organizations, WHO, United Nations, Gavi, the Bank of International Settlement, the World Economic Forum, and so on. And when we also look at the whole propaganda, so the campaign against Switzerland started back end of the 90s under Clinton, with Jewish money, and that we have basically, which was absolutely nonsense. I mean, but that basically accelerated. And so, I mean, that people were even saying, that Switzerland was important, that the Germans were able to go on with their war, which is absolutely nonsense as well. I mean, of course, Switzerland we have been forced. We were the only country during the Second World War on the gold standard. And, the Allies, plus, also the Nazis and all the other guys, they basically wanted that Switzerland remains on gold standard, because everyone was making money in Swiss francs and then taking, the gold. But we were a neutral nation. That's, because Switzerland was always decentralized from the bottom up, and we have 7 presidents. We don't only have one president. We have been neutral, armed neutrality, which we have been given, because the history of Switzerland is we basically sold 1.6 million mercenaries during our history. And so, especially when you had all the aristocrats over here in Europe, I mean, because the Swiss were selling the best mercenaries, I mean, the French royalties had, Swiss legions as their personal protection. The same goes for all these rulers and kings and back then. And there was always one rule that, if Switzerland or the Tagsatzung back then, it was not Switzerland, of course, but it was, if we are under pressure of being attacked from abroad, that we can basically call back, all the mercenaries. And so a lot of these kings and so on, they thought, hey, let's leave Switzerland alone because they have no natural resources. It's also shithole in a way, because that's what Engels said. 4 different languages, very decentralized and so on. I mean, what do they want there? Alps, hard winters, and so on. And but I mean, this all in combination led to this special position within Switzerland, also because of the Alps. And because I still consider, Switzerland is the model for the free world. At least, it gives the right intention. It means, we have to go decentralized, because Switzerland became the most prosperous nation, not because of banking secrecy and that kind of stuff, that we were basically taking in the money from all the crooks. It was really that we had a very weak government, a lot of freedom. People were not interested in politics. It was really more about trade and innovation. And, we always, all the Protestants, the Huguenots from France brought us the watch industry. Then we had the engineers from Germany, the Protestants who fled to us. HVs, 1840, they had 1,500 employees. They were produced in 1840 because before we had the Confederation and so on. So it was we were the highest industrialized country on the European mainland after the Brits. So, Switzerland, because of that decentralized structures, more freedom, more liberty, that was the basis for the prosperity of Switzerland. And of course, this has been turned, over the last 20, 25 years. And of course, whenever you have liberty, then you also attract crooks. The UN, it's perfect to go to Switzerland, neutral. Nobody was interested in politics. So it always makes sense, also for the guys who want to hide something. And, 50, 60 years ago, 70 years ago, what do you want to say? The UN are all the bad guys. People thought, they still believe that this is a good organization. I used to work 2 years for them. I know what a fucked up, corrupted organization it is. I give you one final example because of Syria, for example. I was responsible for the liaison between the Syrian authorities and the United Nations. And every week you had these SITREP reports from the UN going on the global report. And when I was looking in 2005, I was looking at Syria. There was, Bashar Assad had to flee. There were shootings in Damascus, that rebels are going against Assad and so on. And I always called, in my naivety, I called the headquarters in Jerusalem saying, hey, who is writing that bullshit? It's not true. Nothing is happening here. And so that just showed, so these UN people, they read those reports. That's where you fabricate, the narratives, even a few years ago. And then when you come up and say this is a civil war, then, the idiots working for the UN, of course, they believe it because they have read it, over the last few years and it also goes into all these intelligence agencies and stuff like this. So, it's a Muppet show. I cannot take it serious any longer. So, when I'm on the other side, I met so many tremendous amount of great people, individuals, and I truly believe, the productive ones like Ayn Rand, go gold. When the slave masters without slaves, so with unproductive slaves, what do they want to do? They're just gonna end the system. And I hope, the productive ones, they will switch side and take over their own destiny.
Yeah, that was one reason. As you mentioned, I enjoyed living in Switzerland. Switzerland's an enjoyable place to live. I was in Geneva. I got to see some other parts of Switzerland. A bit too expensive for me to live there. But at the UN, at my Geneva School of Diplomacy, I was a staff assistant for 6 months at the UN. For the Czech Republic, actually, the Czech Republic's mission to the UN. And like you, I just saw all of this same stuff. I didn't want to have anything to do with it. And even, one of my professors who's on this podcast from time to time, Alfred de Zayas, former UN special reporter, he's off on Russia Today. He says the same thing. Like he was sent to, where was it, Venezuela, to do a report for the UN, and he laid everything out, what was really happening. He sends it to the UN. No one reads it. They rewrite it. They throw it in the box in a closet and keep it quiet, because same thing in Venezuela or Syria. They're not gonna. The UN itself is censoring itself because they've got an agenda. And I always just viewed it as a globalist sort of tyrannical structure wanting just world government to control all of us. And look what they're trying to do now with the WHO and pandemic treaty and international health regulations. They want the UN to dictate at the minute level, from Mexico here to Switzerland to every country, how we are going to live our lives. No, thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, no, thank you. Right. And so, really, again, I love your work. Is there any final thought you might have for us then?
I think that's all. I don't want to overstretch it. But it was a pleasure talking to you. Great.
Yeah, and is there, I'll have all of your links in the description, but you've got your website. Where's the best place for people to find you and your work online?
Just www.claudiograss.ch. And there I also run a blog. And if they're interested, I write about philosophy, precious metals, geopolitics. I mean, COVID. I just different topics, but I look at it from the angle of freedom and liberty, of course, and based on these principles. So if they're interested in reading that kind of stuff, they can sign up. It's for free. And when they have questions, I'm always happy, to answer emails. No problem.
How to avoid COVID-19 84. Well, all right. Thank you for being on Geopolitics and Empire, Claudio.
Thank you so much. Have a good day.
I hope you enjoyed this Geopolitics and Empire podcast. The website is geopoliticsandempire.com, and I encourage you to sign up to the free email list that notifies you of every new podcast and other important updates. The email list and website are our last lines of defense. We're being censored and deplatformed. It's almost impossible to find Geopolitics and Empire on the Google search engine. We've been blacklisted. YouTube frequently strikes videos. Facebook restricts our page. Reddit, Twitter, and LinkedIn take down posts. After the Associated Press mentioned Geopolitics and Empire in a 2021 article co-written with NATO or the Atlantic Council, our Patreon account was terminated. Vimeo also terminated our Pro account at one point. In April of 2022, the Department of Homeland Security had PayPal ban us for life. The best free way to help Geopolitics and Empire is to leave a review on Apple Podcasts or elsewhere and subscribe to all of our media channels. You can find the video broadcast now on 5 platforms: Odyssey, Rockfin, Rumble, BitChute, and Brighteon. You can find the audio broadcast on the entire podcast ecosystem: SoundCloud, Apple, Spotify, and so on. My current favorite social media channels are Twitter and Telegram, but you can also find us on Gab, MeWe, Minds, Float, VK, Instagram, Facebook, and LinkedIn. You can support this guerrilla signal by donating via DonorBox, Buy Me a Coffee, Subscribestar, or Crypto. You can purchase a consultation with the host to talk about expatriation, geopolitics, or podcasting. You can also become a monthly or annual member via Stripe and receive benefits such as partaking in a monthly member Zoom call, get access to a weekly recording of my random thoughts, and a private Telegram channel. Thank you for listening.